my goal today is to walk parents, viewers, community members, anyone who's watching this video through how Chicago schools, particularly the high schools, are performing academically. So with that, let's just take the schools and list them out. So these are the schools in Chicago, and I've already filtered for 2012 data to make sure that we're only looking at students who've taken the Explore test in 2010, the plan in 2011, and the ACT in 2012. So we're looking at the same cohort of kids by high school. So here are the schools in Chicago, scrolling down, and we're just going to plot their ACT scores. And as you can see, here's the ACTs across the city. Get rid of this one. For all of these various schools. Now the other thing that I've put on here is a constant of a 21, which according to ACT, a composite score of a 21 or a 22 gives you a roughly good sense that a student is going to go to college and can be guaranteed to get a B or higher in their classes at least 50% of the time. So 21 is really what you should be using when you think about where is my student and how well prepared are they for college. This says that they are fairly well prepared if they're crossing the 21 mark. Now we're just going to sort this so we can get a sense of, in Chicago, how many of these schools are performing at a level that crosses that threshold. Now keep in mind, these are averages for populations of schools. So while Northside College Prep has an average ACT of 29.6, a high percentage of those kids are probably higher than that even, and some of them are lower than that, which is giving them that average. So in the case where you see some of these below the line, there are definitely students at these schools that are performing at a relatively high level on their ACT, and it doesn't necessarily absolutely say that these students aren't prepared for college, but it does say that generally across the city you have some high-performing schools, high schools, that are delivering results that on average are well into the range where ACT says that they are college ready, and you have a large majority of schools that are not there. This is only a quick snapshot at the top level. One thing that's important to take into account is where these students start from. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the Explore score from the 9th grade Explore that this same cohort of kids took. So I'm going to drop that in. And I'm going to put these on the same graph so you can quickly get a sense. And then I'm going to also make sure that everything is synchronized in terms of the scales. So what you see now is, here is Northside College Prep High School. In the orange is their ACT of 29.6, and in the blue is the score that the 9th graders got on their Explore. So when they came in, they took a test, got a 22.4, and they grew roughly 7 points or so to a 29.6 over the time period from that 9th grade beginning of the year test to their end of 11th grade, or their ACT test that they took at the end of the 11th grade. From here you can get a sense of, okay, which of these schools are actually delivering pretty solid growth. For instance, you look here, you have a Noble school that the students come in at an average of a 15.5 on their Explore, and they're leaving at a 21.9, which is exceptional growth in a year's time. So this gives you a sense of, okay, who's performing relative to those growth metrics. Now I'm going to put on here another reference line, which this line is going to represent the average ACT score for the city of Chicago, including selective enrollments, which Northside College Prep, for those of you that don't know, is a selective enrollment school, and obviously it skews the data to some degree because it's a very high performing school. So here's the average ACT for the district. So you get a sense of how the high schools are performing relative to the average ACT and relative to this benchmark that ACT says is the ideal for college readiness, or at least the bottom end of that ideal. I mean, ideally you'd want your students to be scoring much higher than that. Now, to add another layer to this, let's just look at it by school type. I'm going to create a view that's going to allow us to see only the ACT. I'm going to put into school type so you can still make out where the 9th grade Explore score is. So now we're looking at it by school type. And as you can see, you have your selective schools in purple, and your charter schools in green, traditional schools in brown, and then a sprinkling of military and alternative schools and a magnet school as you scroll down. And what this tells you is that the top performing schools in the city are predominantly selective enrollment, Now, in terms of open enrollment, where any student can go, the charter schools are far outperforming the other alternative traditional public schools and even some of the selective schools. Now, to further give you a sense of how performance is going, you want to take a look at just the gains by themselves. And these gains, I'm going to put in the view so you can actually see how each of these schools has performed. I'm going to create a view that's going to allow you to see the gains themselves. So here you can see the gains as you go down through. I'll color coordinate this again by the type of school. Northside College Prep had a gain of 7.2 from Explore to ACT. Peyton, a gain of 6.4. And as you go down, you can see that some of these charter schools are performing at an extremely high rate when it comes to the gains that they're showing for their students. Now, one way to think about Explore gains, and this is more of a sense of where the measure should be, a 4 or higher in terms of growth from your Explore to ACT is considered pretty solid growth for a given year. Now, I would argue that we should all be trying to get scores 6 or higher, and I think that's where a lot of the top performing schools are targeting. But for the landscape of CPS, let's just take a look at this because it gives us a sense of what schools are in this range. And as you can see, there's very few, it's mostly selective enrollment schools and charter schools that have grown above this 4 rate. And you also get a sense that these students are coming in at very different levels. Now, what I don't have here, and I'll provide in another view, is the free and reduced lunch status for these schools, so you get a sense of what the populations look like from an economic standpoint, because that also has a bearing on a direct correlation on how the kids come in when they start in terms of their performance. Because a student at a Northside College Prep selective enrollment school, you have a lot of students coming from an economic background that's in a better position than a student who might be going to some of these other traditional public schools further down on the list. But again, this is just a snapshot to provide an idea of what it means in terms of ACT absolute and how far kids are growing. And as you can see, charters versus districts, traditional district schools, and charters versus selective enrollment, the growth at a selective enrollment is very similar to that at the top performing charters. And in addition to that, charters are starting with student populations that are much more closer to the traditional public schools in terms of where their Explore scores begin. In fact, it's very similar, and charters are still generating a growth rate that's pretty significant.